Dioxins are measured in parts per quadrillion. That puts everything in a context. That's why I say the fentanyl of chemicals. Like for me, even being, tall and a big guy, it wouldn't take much fentanyl to kill me if it was just a trace amount was on a table. That's why I say that. I've never seen chemicals that are this dangerous that are measured in parts per quadrillion. One thing I'm making clear when it comes to our fellow citizens in East Palestine, if you don't have sustainable health in communities, then nothing else really matters. And it's great to be here to talk about this. But some of the results that I have recently are in people's soil in their homes that's not being tested by the EPA or any agencies. And without getting too technical, there are phenol compounds, aldehyde compounds, and benzene compounds. You can't find what you don't look for. So if you're not looking for certain contaminants, you're not going to find them. And separately, there's something called what a false non-detect. If you only take surface water, you may get a false non-detect and say, oh, the water is safe. And it's very simple. What I learned going back to my own disaster, water and contamination are never in equilibrium. So if you just take a 250 milliliter jar or a 500 milliliter jar out of the water, that only tells you what's in that jar. And you have to test the whole water column.
Now I'm on the right side.
Now, when it doesn't fit any agenda, and especially when it can hurt the establishment, the news media forgets to be a voice for the voiceless and memory holes major events. Remember East Palestine, Ohio, a train derailment chemical spill that caused evacuations? Most were quick to say, oh, all is well. People can return to their homes. It's fine. But people are still suffering. One contamination expert recently did testing in Sulphur Creek in East Palestine and has just recently got test results back, which he's going to be sharing with us shortly. 17 years ago, Scott Smith's life was turned upside down when his small business was wiped out in oil-contaminated floodwaters in St. Johnsonville, New York. This event changed the course of his life, making it his mission to focus on solving water contamination problems. Smith, now as Chief Sustainability Officer at ECO Integrated Technologies, Inc., and CEO of Aquaflex, frequently works on the ground in contamination events, supporting communities by investigating and finding the truth and bringing people together from all sides to help the affected communities diagnose and solve water contamination events. He's been to more than 60 different oil and chemical disasters in the US and abroad. The locations of these real world events have been his laboratory. Scott's unique perspective as a CEO and community liaison brings his personal and professional experience to each contamination location he lends his expertise to. He's a graduate of Baylor University and of Harvard Business School. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. I happen to notice your posts on Twitter, actually, of all places. And by the way, people can find him on Twitter at Water Warrior One, just like you see on the screen there. But I was like, yeah, it's about time we hear about East Palestine. And you said you just have some new results that you can share with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christy. Very
You bet.
important to educate the world. And I want to say I'm down here at EarthX and doing speaking and 170,000 people, and it's all about sustainability. One thing I'm making clear when it comes to our fellow citizens in East Palestine, if you don't have sustainable health in communities, then nothing else really matters. And it's great to be here to talk about this, but some of the results that I have recently are in people's soil in their homes that's not being tested by the EPA or any agencies. And without getting too technical, there are phenol compounds, aldehyde compounds, and benzene compounds, and they simply should not be present.
Wow. Okay. So this all got started when your business and your 100 employees' jobs were wiped out in oil and chemical contaminated floodwaters. So did you have experience with all of this, like being able to test and all of that before, or was this just
No,
something that you got into? Oh wow, you just like dove
great
into
question.
it.
Let me tell you, and I'm down here in the middle of Earth Day and EarthX, and when I was wiped out in oil contaminated floodwaters, my business, these white single use plastic booms and pads weren't working, and I had a medical foam. Uh, one of my materials, or open cell foam, is used. Actually, the U.S. Army applied for a 510K with the FDA, and it's approved as part of a medical device that if our troops are exposed to sarin gas, you rip it open and you live, and it neutralizes it. So the interesting thing is this material was sitting in the corner of the factory sucking up all the oil. Needless to say, the insurance company didn't pay because they declared my manufacturing space in a basement. So I liquidated my entire life, and I got a little obsessed with oil and chemical contamination in water. So I created these other products for remediation and for water testing. And then what I went through, what my employees went through, if I started going into communities as a passion to help people across the US, and if I could prevent communities or one person in a community from having to go through what I went through with my employees, it's all worth it.
And so, I mean, when you heard about this happen, what happened in East Palestine, did you just jump into action? You're like, oh my gosh, that like these people are not being honest. Like, did you just, what did you do? How did you approach it?
Well, I've been out there long enough. Actually, on Twitter, usually Twitter or Facebook, uh, out going to a community, people ask. So uh, Miller was reaching out, and then I started testing the water and the soil. And I have an expression: is you can't find what you don't look for. So if you're not looking for certain contaminants, you're not going to find them. And separately, there's something called what a false non-detect. If you only take surface water, you may get a false non-detect and say, "Oh, the water is safe." And it's very simple. What I learned going back to my own disaster, water and contamination are never in equilibrium. So if you just take a 250 milliliter jar or a 500 milliliter jar out of the water, that only tells you what's in that jar. And you have to test the whole water column. What I say too is life exists in the water column, above the bottom, beneath the surface. And especially with these dioxins and heavy molecules, they settle into the soil. So a fish doesn't live in the water for a split second. A child doesn't play in the creek for a split second. You walk on the surface, you're releasing chemicals. So you have to test the entire water column, and you have to test the creek bank.
Now, dioxins, I had, fortunately, because I am in alternative media, I listen to other alternative media, and I feel like I would have never known, even heard of dioxins if I hadn't had that as an outlet, was able to listen to something besides the mainstream. Now, you have compared dioxins to the fentanyl of chemicals. So, how serious is this, and why, if it's so serious, is it not talked about more?
Yeah, I don't know. In 60 disasters, this is the first time I've dealt with dioxins, and I have a great team of experts. You know, Twitter's been great, uh, OSHA experts, and I have experts around me that help me look at the test results that go back to DuPont and Dow with dioxins. And it's the fentanyl of chemicals. This puts it in perspective. I'm used to dealing in parts per billion or parts per million with all oil and chemicals, and sometimes parts per trillion. Dioxins are measured in parts per quadrillion. That puts everything in a context. That's why I say the fentanyl of chemicals. Like for me, even being, tall and a big guy, it wouldn't take much fentanyl to kill me if it was just a trace amount was on a table. That's why I say that. I've never seen chemicals that are this dangerous that are measured in parts per quadrillion.
And I mean, it's my understanding that what happened, the derailment, was ripe for releasing dioxins. Is there evidence of that that you can prove?
Yeah, and I want to explain something, and this is the first time I'm talking about it in any media. Dr. Beatrice Golem from the University of California at San Diego actually reached out to me, and we are forming a collaboration with my testing results. Now, is an expert, a medical doctor that has helped our military personnel in Iraq. Until East Palestine, to the best of my knowledge and what I've learned, there hasn't been anything in the US that occurred like in the war in Iraq with the burning oil wells and other materials that created dioxins and oil all mixed together. And East Palestine, not only the initial derailment with the explosion, but then the quote controlled burn created a variety of chemicals. And what I have learned from her, even though I say you can't find what you don't look for, and I'm looking for everything, I may not even know what to look for here because these chemicals combine in different ways and create other chemicals that have potential big implications for human health.
Wow. It's so scary. So, what did you think when you saw the mainstream news reports saying people were already sent back to their homes and the EPA was saying everything's fine, like we've done our testing and everything. And then you had Governor Mike DeWine saying the same thing, like our experts say that everything's fine. So, what did you think when you saw all those reports?
Well, number one, don't underestimate the power of undue influence, lobbyists, and PR. And let there be no doubt about it, the PR are calling all the shots. And the 4 Ds of PR: delay, deny, discredit, dismiss. And for example, last night I've heard, I guess there was an EPA release about the quote soil, you know, being safe, not a big deal. But if you look in the fine print, it says no risk assessment, and they cover themselves with no risk assessment. So when it comes to this PR, don't forget the 4 Ds. There's the facts and there's the truth. You can come out with a fact making the soil appear to be safe, but the truth is, how did these chemicals combine? How did they impact? And you're talking now, what, a month and a half after the derailment. And for example, some of the stuff I'm looking for in furnace filters, I think I'm the only one testing it in the comprehensive soil testing. It's like a murder in your house, and you found a trace of blood with the murderer, and the murderer saying, well, that's not my, that might look like my blood, but that's just a small amount of blood. So that's unfortunately what goes on in these situations.
Wow, that's so scary. I mean, and why that's another thing that I heard again only talked about on alternative media is why were more of these agencies not testing things like furnace filters, not testing things like the people's roofs where things could really settle. You didn't really hear about that.
Well, you can't find what you don't look for. It is that simple. And other than taking a biopsy of someone that's got lungs that's getting sick, if you want to know what they were exposed to breathing in, the furnace filters are the next best thing, and also the air intakes. And I can't speak for the agencies and the railroad. Why are they not testing? Well, if you don't want to find it, you can't find what you don't look for. And then if you can have the right PR people to um, talk about some facts, but not the truth in the context of soil only. For example, the municipal drinking water probably is safe from everything I've seen, but you can't. The fact, if the fact is true that the municipal drinking water is safe, and it appears that is true, you can't take that fact and then say the soil's safe, the creek is safe, and so on.
Now, there was a quote you had sent talking about the narrative coming out from the railroad and government agencies, from their PR people, saying that dioxins are ubiquitous and in the environment. So, where did they get that from, and why? How are they able to say that if you're saying that's not true?
Hundreds of different dioxins, and there's something called a fingerprint. And it is true, I understand from all the experts I'm talking to, we have a gas grill in the backyard. You do generate some dioxin. The chlorine, when you chloride burning it, you're creating a broad spectrum of dioxins that aren't in your campfire or anything else, and some of them very dangerous. For example, we also just got our first control samples back in a waterway that was not impacted, and there are very low levels of dioxins, but there are 9 less dioxins in the control sample than are in Sulphur Creek. And that, without getting too complicated, that goes into what I'm talking about, the fingerprint or the blood, comparable to the blood on your wall in the house if there's a murder. So the fingerprint of the impacted areas and the type of dioxins appear to be different than the unimpacted areas. And one other major thing, Christy, and I learned this from Dr. Gollum, is dioxins accumulate in your body and don't go away. Other events I've been in, people get better over time, things dissipate. But this is the first time I'm seeing people get sicker and sicker. And I'm on a mission to work with a great team of experts and Dr. Golem to help figure out why.
Well, I mean, thankfully, we at least had some national attention brought more to the situation with Erin Brockovich coming to town, and she's got obviously a great history of standing up for the people, particularly when it comes to water quality safety. Have you been able to have any conversations with her, or do you have confidence that she'll stay on this to make sure that people are held accountable?
Yeah, I know Erin, and I talk. I've met with her and talked with her over the years, and her scientific expert Bob Bocock. We have been in communication, and this is an area where all the university scientists and everyone. It's a great team of people. You literally can't have enough independent testing. You can't have enough attention on this matter because the people of East Palestine need the truth. They need to understand why they're getting sick. And one other thing, back to the ubiquitous in the environment, I don't really even need to see my testing results because it's this simple. The health symptoms, the burning lungs, the rashes, the coughing up blood, that was not ubiquitous in the environment with health symptoms prior to the derailment, the explosion, and the controlled burn. It's really kind of simple logic in things like this.
Now, I got on a personal note. I mean, things are already busy enough for me with being a mom of 3 and trying to navigate the independent news world. So, although because obviously curiosity and the nature of being a longtime journalist, I was feeling pulled there. I wanted to be there, wanted to be where the action was, be able to cover it. But yes, I mean, I also, again, I'm a mom of 3. Like I'm married and want to remain fertile. So I didn't go. And so got on that personal note, did you worry? I mean, do you when you go to these disasters, do you worry about yourself and like what you could be exposing yourself to?
Well, first of all, I have a good doctor. I stay in touch. Thanks for asking. I do this willingly, so I don't complain to help. And I get in and out over a period of 2 to 3 days. And I can tell you, every time I've gone there, 2 to 3 days, I get a headache. It takes a few days to recover, and there's a feeling on the ground, almost like my college days where I was drinking at a party, and it dissipates and goes away over time. But as far as my safety, I'm not concerned. I'm more concerned about the residents that were there following the derailment and what they were really exposed to and what accumulated in their body. And I've again learned this from the medical experts. It's the exposure for days, for weeks, accumulating in your body.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I'm sure that they're so thankful that people like you have not forgotten them because certainly haven't seen any mainstream reporting on this sin for weeks now. What is there any points that you want to make sure because the people aren't getting any news on this anymore? Is there anything we didn't cover or anything that we should know or any suggestions you have on how we can stay connected to what's going on?
Yeah, I would say a message for those in East Palestine that they're not forgotten. And I want to say, I was is society right now is off the rails. It really is. You want to talk about derailments, and I was traveling with a resident on a golf cart. The sun was setting, and he looked at me. He said, "Scott, you and everyone else working together has restored my belief in humanity." And there's something different about East Palestine. People are coming together across it doesn't matter your politics, doesn't matter anything else. People are coming together. And in a way, my experience here has restored my faith in humanity. So this is a very positive thing. And I know firsthand the the impact of being wiped out in a disaster. And for those, don't give up hope. It can be very challenging, but there is a great team. I've never in all the disasters had so many people reach out to me, uh, experts saying, "How can I help?" So we are going to get the truth, and we're going to do everything in our power, with or without media coverage. We're going to get the truth.
That's awesome, and I mean, that's really what we're about is going after the truth and really informing people and being a voice for the voiceless, because this is that used to be one of the tenets of journalism, is to be a voice for the voiceless. These people haven't had a voice, they've been as much as forgotten, but thank you for continuing to take action and be there for them. And we certainly want to be able to check in with you again. And so, thank you so much, Scott, for breaking that down for us. And any final words or anything that we can do again to
I just
stay in
want to
touch?
thank you, Christy. I want to thank you, Christy, and other media that has covered this. And Tucker Carlson and Fox News are the only ones I've interviewed with them. But you don't realize, I hope you realize, that your coverage of this is directly helping the people of East Palestine. So I can't thank you enough for your coverage and everyone else. And thank
Awesome. Well, glad to do it. I mean, just lost journalism, a lost art. Well, thank you again, Scott Smith, and we'll be checking in with you again.
Okay.